When people ask me like, what's so special? I get to drive fancy cars. I get to buy nice things. Nah, I don't. That's not what I do. That's not what I care about. That to me will live with me forever. When I decided, even when the times were tough for the practice, for myself, for the staff, for everybody, for the whole world, that I could still make a very human decision, a very patient-centric decision, and not a business decision. When I talk about this, and 20, 30 years from now, that's probably still going to be one of my most proud moments of myself.
Hey there, it's Dr. Ryan Corte, and I'm looking for North Carolina licensed optometrists or those interested in becoming licensed in the state of North Carolina to join my team. If that's you or somebody you know, reach out to me on social media or email me at ryan.court1@gmail.com. Now, enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Will Toe. So how do you go about navigating chaos? You've put yourself in a position, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, and you've had some chaotic experiences. I think the most recent one I saw, and I'm sorry this happened, was a planned robbery at one of your offices while you were on site. Like, tell me about that chaotic experience and how did you navigate that? And where are we today?
This has been an interesting year. There's actually much more that's happened since then as well too. But yeah, we'll start with that. That was in end of February, and I was just in my practice, one of my newer practices, cold start, so it was a little bit slower one. And I just finished with the patient last one of the afternoon before lunch, and I took the patient out, handed him off to my optician, right, and then walked back into my practice, into the exam room of the practice to start charting. And then about 10 minutes later, I just hear some yelling and screaming. And I kind of look out and I see that there are 4 people inside the practice wearing, all black masks, everything. And 2 of them were attacking my staff, who was still there with the patient. So the patient was still there as well. And then the other 2 were basically just taking stuff off of trying to take frames off the board and shoving them into these trash bags. It's an interesting moment there because you really don't, we can talk about how you should prep for those type of moments all day, but you really don't know what you're going to do until you get to that moment, right? And, every single time we've talked about this with the staff, it's like, let them do what they want to do. Don't get hurt. It's not worth it. We got insurance, all these type of things, which unfortunately is why they're so brazen sometimes, because they know that they can just get away with stuff. Mm-hmm. But the difference in this situation is a couple of them were attacking my staff, who was also defending himself and defending the patient. And so it was a different situation because it wasn't just stuff. Right. And while another staff who was kind of hiding behind the front desk. And I just looked at the situation. I only probably had a second to really think about what am I going to do here. I just thought I have to get involved because I'm not going to leave my staff and the patient potentially getting hurt while I hide, which even though, as I said, that's what I would tell all my other staff to do. And so that was a moment they didn't see me, luckily. So that's when I decided to engage. And I basically tackled 2 of them, kind of wrestled with them. And I don't think they knew I was there. And I'm a lot bigger than they are. So I think when I got involved, it scared them and they just instantly just bolted out. Unfortunately, they did take a bunch of things. They also broke a lot of things, which was almost worse. Luckily, the whole thing was over in probably 40, 50 seconds. It was quite fast. But when we tell people it's not the actual moment it happens, because once again, stuff is stuff. Nobody got seriously hurt, just some bumps and bruises, probably had a sore hip for a few days. It's the aftermath where I could see it in some of my staff. I talked to them afterwards. We basically shut down the practice for the rest of that day and the next day, just so that we could, clean up first, which took a while, and also just talk about, hey, let's make sure everyone's okay mentally also, not just physically. And it's interesting because you could see that where overall, I think they were okay, but there's still a part of them that still felt that fear, which I don't think is fair. And this is what I hate about these situations. It's not about the stuff. It's about the fact that for the next however long, every person that walks through the door, there's a small part of you that thinks, oh, is this person going to also rob us? Am I going to get hurt potentially? Are they going to try to pull out a gun or a knife or something? And it's that feeling, which is just so unfair to people, because you should be able to feel safe at work. You should not have to ever fear for your life or fear that something bad could happen to you. Same thing with your home, right? People can say, well, if somebody breaks in your home and steals your laptop and TV, it's just stuff. But it's not just stuff. It's the fact that every single creak, every single small sound you hear in your home, you're going to freeze up for however long because you think, oh, is it about to happen again? And that's not a good feeling. And that's not fair that they have to deal with that. It's not fair that we had to deal with that. And I could see it. Every time I asked them, "Hey, how are you feeling? What's going on?" They would tell me they're okay. And I think they believed it. But there were certainly moments I saw for basically the week afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
where, like I said, they hear a loud noise, like something outside, and that's a second or two where they freeze up, like thinking, "Oh no, something bad's about to happen." That's not fair to them. And so that's what I hate about these moments. This is why for me, it's not just stuff. It's that safety, that happiness, that joy that you should have with being able to go to work and do something that you're proud of and help people, and that gets superseded by the fact that you feel unsafe, or you could feel unsafe at certain moments. So that was probably, to me, harder than as a business owner, as uh, someone who has employees, harder for me to watch them deal with. And to me, what I felt like I had tried to help them deal with more than it was the actual robbery. Does that kind of make sense?
It does.
It's an odd feeling. It's a bad feeling.
Well, I commend you first and foremost for doing everything that you possibly could that was inside of your control, and also having a policy in place of like, listen, stuff is stuff. We can let them take stuff, but if it comes down to your personal well being and
Yeah,
the personal well being of our patients, then we need to take action. Yeah, and I can only imagine, because they were violated not only mentally but emotionally in the workplace. And something that they never signed up for. So
yeah.
how have you moved forward to overcome these circumstances? Have you done anything in particular to work with them, whether it's, counseling with, get them in touch with counselors, or have you guys done any kind of, office meeting role play scenarios, things that
Yeah.
help build back that culture that you've worked so hard to instill?
Well, we definitely did that almost every day for a couple of weeks. Just we blocked off some time for us to just sit and talk, right? And one of the staff, the one that was actually fighting, he did go see a psychiatrist, and he to deal with that, because he
Yeah.
was there. It was, as I said, there was that fear that was there, that tiny bit that stayed with him, and made him very uncomfortable just around people in general. And so making sure they have time for that, making sure that, as I said, I'm available, but me also being proactive instead of reactive. I could have just said, "Hey, if you have any questions or you want to talk, come in. My door's always open," which is absolutely true. But it's also, I'm checking in on them. I'm talking. We should be able to talk about this, and whether it's one on one or as a group, it doesn't matter. We're going to find a way to make sure that we understand that we're all in this together, and that we're all going to take care of each other. And having them focus on the good, like the fact that I told my staff, like, if you really think about it, yes, you were protecting yourself, but you were also protecting the patient that was there. How scary was it for the patient, right? They're coming in, they're
Mm-hmm.
here for an eye exam. They don't work here, right? And for them to just want to check their eyes and then pick up some glasses afterwards, and then they have to deal with this as well too. And I told my one staff, the one that was in the videos fighting, you weren't just protecting yourself, you were protecting her. I bet you that if you were to ask her right now, she would probably be so grateful to you that that you protected her. That's a big deal. Because we all say we would do these things, right? As I mentioned, we can talk about all day, but when stuff actually happens, who are you? What kind of person are you? And who will you be in these type of moments? You are the type of person that protected another human being from harm. You should be
Mm-hmm.
very proud of that. And I think that made him feel a lot better too, right? Because once again, it's nobody wants to think like, "Oh, I'm here to protect stuff," right? I'm here to protect pieces of plastic on the on a shelf. But when you're like, "I'm the type of person who would get in harm's way to protect another human being," that helps you a lot. And so I tried to get him to focus more on that, and the rest of the staff. It's like, that's who we are. That you should be very proud of that. So when people talk about this online, or your friends and family who saw the video, because it certainly went more viral than we expected, you should be able to tell them, I was there to protect people. I wasn't there to protect, I said, glasses, right? So that's who you are. And that should be something you're very proud of. And those kind of little pep talks help. And it's absolutely true. I wasn't just making it up. It's actually what happened. And that's what I felt happened. And same thing, I wasn't there to protect the stuff. I was there. I walked into the situation. I jumped in because I saw that my staff was getting harmed and the patient was potentially getting harmed. So felt that I needed to jump in. I could have also ran into the back, and that would have been an acceptable thing to do. But I kind of helped get through that myself because of that, right? You don't want those things lingering in your mind, and you don't want them to fester, but you want the good, that you do to be able to, supersede that whenever possible. So those kind of things, it's tough because I'm not a trained psychiatrist. I don't really know what to do, but I gave them the opportunity to talk to trained psychiatrists and counselors. And, I think it took a few weeks, but I think we're back to where we need to be. We're not worried about it happening. And there's a lot of conversations with the San Ramon Police Department, which excellent. They did an excellent job, by the way. They were there within 2 minutes. It was kind of
Oh my
crazy.
gosh.
2 minutes, which unfortunately, as I said, the whole thing lasted 40, 50 seconds. So they were wasn't there quick enough to catch them, but they were there and they made themselves very available to conversations, not just with me as the practice owner, but with my staff, just to talk, because they've obviously dealt with a lot of this stuff and they know, they know that sometimes people just need somebody to talk to. So I think all things considered, nobody got seriously hurt and we're all doing a lot better. So I appreciate that. I hope nobody ever has to go through this stuff, but if it does happen to your practice, that you, at least nobody gets hurt, which is by far the most important thing, and that you don't try to hide from your friends and family. Don't feel like ashamed that something bad happened to you. Your friends are your friends for a reason. Your family are your family for a reason, because they will always be there for you, no matter what happens. So don't bundle up and hide when you know that there's a huge support system ready to help you. So that's all I can really say about that. I mean, it was just fast. It's scary. And then as you start looking to it, you realize it's happening everywhere, which makes you more sad about the whole situation. Like that we should not allow this as a community, not just as optometry practice owners, but as a community, for this type of stuff to happen, right? In our homes, in our workplaces, in any parts of our lives. It's sad that it is becoming more and more of a thing. And it was interesting. The local sunglass hut for that practice, the manager came by because she heard what happened that day, and I was talking to her, and I was like, "Oh man, it's so unsettling for something like this to happen." And then, but I asked her, like, I've heard of sunglass huts getting robbed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you deal with it? She goes, "I hate to say it like this, but you get used to it." And I was like, wow. Her sunglass hut that was, 30, 40 feet away from us, she'd gotten robbed, I think she said 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's sad that she's like, I hate to say it like this, but you get used to it. It doesn't rattle you anymore because it's just normal. I'm like, wow, that's sad. That's not how it should be. I'm not trying to, with that video, I wasn't trying to motivate people to fight back, right? Obviously, once again, your safety matters more than anything else, but I hope that it'll cause a lot of these criminals in the future to maybe hesitate a little bit when they think about targeting an optometry office, because it's like, well, these guys are more willing to fight back. That I'm not going to rob that place. I hope that's what they feel, but you never know.
Well, I'll give you a lot of credit. It's a heavy situation that you found yourself. You didn't ask for that. Your team didn't ask for that. And just taking the glass half full approach that nobody got hurt and you're doing the right things to support your team, not only physically, mentally, and emotionally, but just from a boss perspective, I commend you. What other challenges have you been navigating? You said a lot's been going on this year.
So that happened on a Friday afternoon in a shopping center of all things. So I was like, wow, they were pretty bold to do that Friday at 1 p.m. in a shopping center. The following Tuesday, so that's 4 days later, we actually had to deal with the fire in that practice, not in that building. So what happened was there was a new restaurant being built about 2 spaces away from us. And somebody had stored some supplies incorrectly and it caused a fire in that restaurant. And so what happened was they had to deal with that. So that wasn't a fire in our practice, but the smoke actually set off the sprinklers of the space in between us. So not my space, but so fire 2 spaces away, sprinklers going off 1 space away. And so smoke going through all the ventilation. So we had to deal with that because you could smell it quite heavily. But also with the sprinklers going off in the space in between, that soaks through, right? The
Oh
walls and the
man.
carpets. So yeah, so just after dealing with that, 4 days later, dealing with the fact that, okay, well, it wasn't anything that was our fault. It wasn't even in our space, but it was, the tenants 2 spaces away from us caused a fire, which caused the sprinklers to go off, which caused damage in our practice. And you're just looking at this and you go, all right, what else is going to happen? Right. So,
Murphy's Law, right? You're like,
yeah,
okay,
right,
two things
right.
have happened. What else is going to come through?
And then dealing with that. So that's another insurance claim, right? That you got to replace the carpets. They have to go into the drywall, make sure there's no mold, the baseboards, all that kind of stuff. A few of the cabinets that were had a little bit of water damage as well too. So you're just looking at the situation, and as a practice owner, it's like, well, I will say I've been fortunate not have to deal with a lot of major stuff, and then everything kind of all happened at once. You know, so every time it's interesting when people are like, "Oh, you're a business owner. Oh, you must make a lot of money. You're like you must be rolling in it, and you're very successful. You have a nice car, a nice house, all this stuff." And you're like, if you sometimes think about the amount of hours that we put into this, I probably would make more money working as an associate, or even in I bet I bet I could make a good amount of money working at a Starbucks for the amount of hours that I put in and the amount of you know I think I could make a lot of money in tips as well too. Being the type of person I am. But not to disparage that, but it's just interesting. Like this business owner, you never know, right? It's like being a parent. So I'm obviously I don't have kids.
I
You
do.
have kids, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I have a question for you here because I always felt this was always interesting to ask for a lot of my friends. Which do you think is harder, being a practice owner or being a dad?
I think that the initial part of being a practice owner, you're kind of learning and you can kind of control a lot of the facets that are, that come with owning a business.
Yeah.
However, children don't come with a manual. There's no playbook. Every single human being is different. So you could have a child that's super easy. They sleep through the night
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately. And wow, that's great. And then you have your second child and it's like they have colic and they're not sleeping, they're screaming. And so I would say it's easier to have a business, a practice, as you scale though, those turn into kids too, right? So how many
Yep.
practices did you have, Will?
7 right
Yeah.
now.
So,
7.
it was a lot easier to have one than it is
Yep.
7. So,
Yep.
as you add more kids to your family, that also adds to
Yeah.
complexities.
But it's
I will
always.
say,
Oh, no, go ahead.
no, I will say that I think it's easier, though, in general, to control things that aren't human beings than to control little ones. And all that being said, I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, being a dad and being a husband is really a big part of my why.
Yeah.
And obviously, serving the community is the other big part of my why. And so they both have their unique challenges, but I would say it's a little easier maybe on the practice ownership side.
I'll be give me a few years before I become a dad, and
There
then
you go.
I'll be able to answer that question back for you.
Yeah.
But that's always interesting because that's what people always say. It's very much the same as being a parent. And no matter how old your kid is, you're always going to worry about them. You're always going to care about them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes bad things will happen, and your heart breaks, right? Because there are things that you can control, and there are certainly a lot of things you can't control. So it's kind of the same thing with the practice. There's going to be a lot of bad. There's going to be a lot of good. And to me, by far, the good outweighs it. And once again, it allows me to live the life that I have now because of the practice and that autonomy that you get with being a practice owner. But at the same time, you just have to accept that bad things will happen, whether it's your fault or not. And I think that's where, as I can't compare personally because I'm not a parent yet, but I've heard a lot of people say that. And so when they say, like, what do you do when you have a flood and a fire and robberies all happen in the same week? Well, I just got to take care of my people. I got to do what I can. Put the insurance claims. And you just got to keep pushing forward. You're going to have terrible weeks. But by far the great weeks, the ones where you take care of people, where you make a difference in people's lives, where you inspire your staff to do amazing things and they get to take care of people and do amazing things, those by far outweigh the bad that can happen. So, it's interesting. Sometimes we do dwell on that. And you got to learn to, whether you compartmentalize it or you just learn to kind of not let it eat you up on the inside. But I had this conversation with people last week, a couple of people last week, where isn't it interesting that if you see, say, 100 patients in a week, right? And 99 out of 100 can be amazing. They love you. You love them. It's super fun. You did amazing things. You took care of them. And then you have that one patient that just complains about everything. They yell and scream at you and the staff. They might leave you a 1-star review on Google and Yelp. And then you don't, but you just focus on that. Even though statistically you had a 99% satisfaction rate, which is amazing. But that one person, you can't get them out of your mind, or you dwell on it a little bit too much. And that's kind of how I feel about these moments, the robbery, the flooding, the fires, all that kind of stuff. It's like that happened, and it just happened all at the same time, which is unfortunate. But when I think about me being a practice owner for the last 5 years, with me being able to help all the people I have and all the staff that I have, who are amazing people, all the ones who maybe were only there for a little bit and moved on to grad school or things like that, like the fact that I've been able to make a difference in my community and with the people I work with and the patients I see, that's what I focus on, right? I try to pull myself back to those moments and those thoughts, rather than just sit and dwell on the fact that a few bad things happened to me. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm ignoring it. We will get through it, but we'll get through it together. And we also have to remember why we're here and what we're doing this for.
Well, that's a skill set. Well, it's one that you are continuing to, I'm sure, refine, but that's an incredible mindset, an incredible skill set. I kind of think of like the absolute best athletes that are out there. They're playing a sport, right? And they go out there and let's just say it's football and it's a quarterback and they miss a pass or they throw an interception. They have to have a short memory of that instant and then come back in, be very present, and take that next step. You had all these things happen, but guess what? You had to pick yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
You had to get the practice back, and you needed to lead by example. And in doing so, you're going to continue to build out a great practice, despite all the bumps, the bruises, the chaos that comes with practice ownership and business ownership in general. My father-in-law, he's always like, Ryan, with business comes challenges. With challenges, that's part of life, the bumps, the bruises, the chaos. But if you do it the right way, the long-term trajectory of that experience is going to far outweigh the negatives. And we're conditioned as human beings to focus on negative things. So if you can change that mindset and focus on some of the small positives that are happening during the storm, that's what gets you through. Right. And that's what makes you a successful entrepreneur and an successful practice owner. And you've even taken to the level of, hey, I've built out a beautiful practice here in California, but you have a practice in Alaska. You have practices across the country. Yep. Tell me a little bit about that Alaska experience, though, because you did back and forth, flying back and forth, and you instilled tele-optometry. Tell me about that.
So, that's actually probably like the number one question I get asked. Like, why do you have a practice in Alaska? It's so different. And a few reasons, right? So one, it was a really solid practice, and as I said, it passed that vibe check, right, that we talked about earlier. So first thing, it was a friend of a friend who was retiring. And first, they just kind of reached out to me, the mutual friend said, hey, I know somebody who's selling a practice in Alaska. And we just kind of laughed about it because you're like, okay, that's funny, right? And then a couple months later, they reach back out again and they go, hey, I was actually serious about that. So if you actually ever think about doing something completely different, you should look into it. It's a good practice. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought you were joking. Like, I didn't even know this was a serious conversation at all, but okay. I mean, it doesn't hurt to check it out. So, I got in contact with the doctor who owned it, and it's a great practice. It's been around for 60 years in Juneau, Alaska, which is the capital of Alaska. And so I would be the third owner of it, and a very big, very well established, very well respected practice. And, met with the doctor who he didn't live there all the time. He flew back and forth between Oregon and Alaska. So he's like, oh, well, I don't need to be there all the time. Practice runs pretty well. I have a really good team, and I go there about 1 week every month. Okay, that seems interesting. So I went to go visit, and same thing. I met the staff. They were great, friendly, easy to talk to. They joke around with each other. There's not a lot of, as I said, almost no drama, things like that. I'm like, wow, this is a really well run practice, and it feels really good. And talking to the doctor, he's like, well, I've been trying to sell it for years, and I'm getting to that age, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to sell it. And if I don't, I might just have to close it. And for a place like Alaska, they don't really have a lot of doctors. So every time a practice closes, that hurts the community quite a bit. Right. Sure. And even at that time, talking to different people in the community, the eye care in particular was very difficult because there's no ophthalmologist in Juneau. And at that point, there had not been one in about 5 or 6 years, and there still isn't one today. So it's a place where optometry does practice at a very high level because there is a necessity there. Because every time I see a patient that requires something that's potentially emergency, you have to ask yourself, can I take care of this patient, or do we have to put them on a plane to Seattle or Anchorage? Because it's about 2 hours in either direction. So it's, if you can't, you're putting a really large burden on that patient. So if it is a true emergency where they have a retinal detachment, of course you're going to do it. But if it's something where, well, I could do it, but in California, I would normally just refer to an ophthalmologist because they're down the street. Well, now the question is, can you do it then? Because that's your choice. And even when I'm in town, the emergency room, I often let them know because they want me to know. They want to know when I'm there, because in case they get anything eye related, they always call me, and first thing they say, can you take care of this situation, or do we have to put them on a plane and send them to Anchorage or Seattle, or a medvac them? That's a tough conversation, because when we talk about scope of practice around the country, we talk about all these things that we want optometry to have. Well, you're in a place where optometry has those things. So are you going to do it, or are we just all talk, right? Where we just want these things, these expanded scopes in the rest of the country, but we don't actually want to do them. We just want the ability to do them. That's an interesting type of thing. So it does challenge you quite a bit as a practitioner, as a clinician, and like, do you actually want to do these things? Because this is a place where the need is there. There is no ophthalmologist, and you have to decide. You're basically a general ophthalmologist when you're up there. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. Yeah. So being able to provide something for a community where, I've had people accuse me before of, hey, well, the only reason why you're successful is because you're in the Bay Area. You're in these high affluent areas. Of course, you're going to be successful, and you're only doing it just so that you can sell, $5,000 glasses to people. And, I'm not going to lie, there's a little part of me that was kind of, I need to prove to these people that I'm not just that guy. I don't mind selling, expensive things to people who want expensive eyewear, right? But at the same time, I'm still here to help people, right? Because being a doctor, especially an optometrist, is not probably the quickest and easiest way to get rich. We certainly work very hard for what we do, and so there could have been a lot of other paths if all I cared about was just making money. Right. I did really want to help people, and I want to make a difference in the community. So why not make a difference in a community that needs it a lot? So there was always a plan to put telehealth optometry up there. Just, of course, it needs to be prepped for it. And the staff needs to be, the right equipment needs to be there. The community needs to be prepped for it as well too. And I was probably there for a year or so, or I owned the practice for about a year, where I did go back and forth quite a bit before we actually implemented telehealth. And even then, when we implemented, we didn't really go full telehealth for about 6 months. So it was quite a bit of back and forth to make sure we did it right. And we tested it here and there with staff, tested it here and there with certain patients, where I would even do telehealth for the patient while I was in the next room, while I was there, because we just needed to test out and me be able to jump in and troubleshoot if something wrong happened. But telehealth, to me, it solves a lot of optometry's problems. And just like the conversation we had earlier about AI, the reason why it's a little bit vilified right now is just because people don't understand it, and they don't understand what it could be. I think that if you're a great doctor and you care about your patients, it doesn't matter what platform you do it in, whether you're live or you're telehealth. Versus, unfortunately, if you're we'll say below average doctor, right? Someone who doesn't care about patients, it doesn't matter if you're live or in telehealth, right? I will put this on everybody here that I do believe that a great doctor who cares doing telehealth will be able to do a better eye exam than a live doctor who doesn't care about their patients 100% of the time, because it's just a platform in which you engage your patients. Whether you're in the room or not doesn't really matter. So as we brought on more telehealth services, it wasn't just for Juneau, but it was one of the intention is to bring it to the surrounding communities, where we talk about some of these smaller villages, right, that have 500 people, 1,000 people scattered throughout Alaska. Wouldn't it be great if we could help bring some eye care to them, more access to eye care? And of course, if we found something dangerous, we could still get them care and triage them and get them to a major hospital where they can get more advanced eye care that they need. But for basic, kind of primary care, checkups, red eyes, there's almost nothing we can't do via telehealth nowadays. Going back to how it affects optometry as a whole, if you ask, half the doctors out there will tell you, as we mentioned, that they believe optometry is too saturated, right? There's too many doctors, there's too many schools, which I I personally disagree with. And then the other half will tell you, I've been looking for an associate for 5 years, right? And we need more schools. We need
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's literally like divided almost 50-50. Uh, you know, from my perspective, I'm sure the numbers are different, but it almost seems like half the people I talk to say too many doctors, the other half not enough. And then we realize there's not a saturation problem in optometry. There's a distribution problem. All the new graduates and the younger doctors tend to want to go into the cities. Not a lot of them want to go into the rural areas unless they're from there, like they were born and raised there. So you just have a distribution issue. Telehealth actually solves that, because if you want to live in the city, have access to a diversity of great food, entertainment, all these things, you can do that, but still practice and help people in a more rural area. So once again, I'm not saying that everybody needs to add telehealth to their practices tomorrow. It's not like that. And as I said, it even took me 6 months of figuring it out every single day, thinking about it every day before we went live, so to speak, and went 100% telehealth. I think people need to really consider it, though, because to me, it will do a lot of good for the profession. It will do a lot of good for the patients. It just needs to be done right. And I will agree with a lot of people that I don't believe a lot of the companies currently offering it are doing it right. Most are not, because there's not a lot of guidelines. And as you said, it's kind of like the Wild West. People will do whatever they want unless told otherwise. But the ones who care, the ones who are trying to do it right, are doing it right. And there's definitely other people that, besides just me, who I feel are doing an excellent job, even better than me in some ways, of really providing telehealth, tele-optometry the right way. So we just need to not be afraid to talk about it. Oftentimes, those doctors who I talk to personally, every time they try to have a conversation on some of these optometry forums, they just get shouted down. People yell, they get threatened, and they just don't even, they feel like they can't even have that conversation with people, because people are just so scared of tele-optometry. And it shouldn't be that way, because it should be a part of our profession. But if we don't talk about it as doctors, we don't allow discussion and engagement, then a bunch of people in suits, MBAs in the suit, will determine what telehealth optometry is, which I don't think they're going to make great decisions compared to doctors.
I commend you for sharing that, first and foremost, just the journey of acquiring a practice, implementing tele-optometry, and doing it the right way. As you referenced, there's a right and wrong way, 100%. There are some tele-optometry organizations that'll remote you into a different room every 5-10 minutes. And, I don't believe that is really the right way. And then there's others that, like, for example, yourself, private practice owner, you trained everybody to work the patient up just right. You beta tested the system in the exam room next door. You made sure it was ironclad before you risked not only the patient care you're going to provide, but your professional livelihood and your license on something like this. And so I agree with you. I think that we have to be open to advancements, and the future is very unwritten with a lot of the technological advancements that we have in store. But change is hard for people, right? We've seen that a lot. That you and I think, are very forward thinking, and we're open to practical innovation, and a lot of people just maybe more hesitant or scared. So it's just par for the course, man. You have done a beautiful job of building out your brand, but also building out your clinic. So what's next for you in your story? I'm going to put a bow on this here. We're over an hour now, and I want to be sensitive to your time. I got to get going here in about 15, 20 minutes myself. Okay. What's next for you? What's your vision? And what are some, just some inspirational thoughts for anybody listening?
In terms of what's next for me, I mean, that's why I told you earlier, I don't 100% know, only because every time I set a goal of this is where I feel like I could be, for my career, I usually hit it a lot sooner, or I know I will hit a lot sooner. So there is no end goal, so to speak. I do want to see where I can take it, because I do want to give back to the profession as much as possible. I don't know. It's interesting because I don't, one of the funniest things is you will talk to a lot of people. And if you mention me, they'll say, oh yeah, he's a great business guy, right? He knows a lot of business. And I actually disagree with that wholeheartedly. I'm a terrible business person. I make terrible business decisions almost every day, because at the end of the day, I try to still make the best patient care decisions and do what's best for the patients. And sometimes that's not always the best business decision. And I'm okay with that. So it's almost by not caring about the business side too much. You have to know it a fair amount, right? You have to understand, you have to know the fundamentals. But if you think about it and you try too hard, it almost takes away that kind of the heart and the soul of your practice, because it's all about the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't ever forget to take care of your patients first above all. So that's always kind of funny to me, because when people ask, like, you're the business guy, does that mean you're gonna have 50 or 100 practices or 200? I don't know, maybe. I've talked to people about maybe franchising my brand, and that would be helpful because I can't be everywhere, and it'd be nice to be able to help it grow and make sure I set the right standards to any of the franchisees. That would be a great thing to do, where I can build it without actually investing as much of my own personal time, as because it's a lot. And kind of to end on that point, and what you said, kind of a little inspirational. When people ask me, what was my favorite moment, or what do you think my best moment is of being a practice owner and being the business guy or the optometry guy? By far, I tell this story quite a bit. The best moment I've ever had as a practice owner was back in the fall of 2020. So we're still in the middle of the pandemic. Vaccine had not been released yet. And students were going back to school, right? But they were doing this distance learning
Mm-hmm.
because people were scared of having their kids, getting COVID. And there was still a lot of uncertainty in those first few months, right? No matter where you were. And I remember having a moment where this woman came in with her two kids. One was 10 and one was 8. And her 10-year-old was a daughter. And she basically came in and said, my daughter, they just started the distance learning school, right? And my daughter gets really bad headaches being on the computer, because they're on them for about 6 hours, right? Doing the distance learning. And she gets headaches after about, 20, 30 minutes, and she can't really learn. And I'm worried about my daughter. Now, in this particular instance, this woman did not have insurance, and she was a single mom, because what happened was, a couple months ago, she told me that her husband was basically beating her. So there's a lot of domestic violence. So one of these days, he took it a little too far. While he was sleeping, took the kids, grabbed as much as they could, stuffed it into clothes, whatever, and then just left and ran away. And so she didn't really have anything, because he was the kind of the breadwinner, and she wasn't working. She was just taking care of the kids. So she didn't have a lot of money, because she had kind of left everything. And she's trying to make it on her own, working, 2 or 3 jobs. She doesn't have any of the jobs to provide insurance, and she just wants to help her daughter. And this is an interesting moment, because at that time, I had not been paying myself for 5-6 months since COVID happened. I didn't furlough any of my staff. I actually kept every single one of them. I had them come in, and I said, we're going to keep training. I don't know if this is going to be a month, a year. At that time, as I said, a lot of uncertainty, but we're going to be prepared when things reopen. And I don't want you all to I don't want to furlough you. Let's come in, and whether we see one emergency patient a day or not, I still want everybody here. And in between, we're just going to watch videos. We're going to learn specialties. We're going to build procedures and protocols for when things open, which is one of the things that helped us when things did open. But until then, when this woman came in, I'm just looking at the situation. I go, this woman needs a lot of help. This kid needs a lot of help. I have not made money. I'm starting to bleed into my own personal money just to keep the practice afloat and to pay my staff. And once again, you get these kind of defining moments that tell you who you are as a person, who you are as a business owner. And I told her, look, I'm not going to profit off of your misfortune. Let's get an eye exam for your daughter. I'm going to get her some glasses. Nothing too expensive. I think we ended up just getting like a Ray-Ban. And I talked to the lab. Can you donate a pair of lenses? Talk to the rep. Can you give me donate the frame or give me a discount? Because I want to help this girl, right? And they helped out where they could. So that's why I say my industry partners, I really like working with them. And we got this girl a pair of glasses. No more headaches. She was happy, perfect. And I was like, that was tough, because as a business owner, you're like, I'm already hemorrhaging money. I'm paying my staff when they're just sitting there. I don't know when this pandemic's going to end. And I need to decide who I am as a person and who I am as a business owner. But I decided that we need to help out this girl no matter what. I told the mom, don't even worry about it, right? This is why we're here. But just, when things are better for you, just come back and, whatever. It's fine. A year later, she came back and with 2 things that she wanted to tell me. One, she's like, she's in a better place now. She met somebody new, and they're very happy. Somebody who takes care of her quite a bit. She brought in a bottle of whiskey for me as a thank you gift. It was a Balvenie 21 year. It is not cheap whiskey. And she's like, I'm in a much better place in life. My new boyfriend takes care of my family and loves the kids. And you know what? Thank you for doing this. So she got me this really expensive bottle of whiskey. And she also had in her other hand, she's like, here's an invitation to our wedding. Thank you. So that was
Wow.
when people ask me like, what's so special? I get to drive fancy cars. I get to buy nice things. Nah, I don't. That's not what I do. That's not what I care about. That to me will live with me forever. When I decided, even when times were tough for the practice, for myself, for the staff, for everybody, for the whole world, that I could still make a very human decision, a very patient-centric decision, and not a business decision. Because I could have just told her, look, sorry, got to run a business, pay whatever you can, or make payments over time, whatever. She probably would have done that, right? The fact that I could make that decision, that I did make that decision, that to me is when I talk about this, and 20, 30 years from now, that's probably still going to be one of my most proud moments of myself. So yeah. So for all the people out there who are watching this, just you said wanted to end on something a little bit more kind of inspirational. It's like, don't forget why you're doing this, right? We could have done a lot of other things. If all we cared about was money, we could have been investment bankers. We could have done all these other things. And we could have been in professions where we potentially hurt people and make a living. There are jobs out there that pay well for you to hurt people and destroy families for a living. We're in a profession where we get to help people. And when it comes down to it, just don't forget that moment. Don't forget those type of moments for yourself. And you may not have the exact same moment I just did right there from a few years ago, but I am really proud that that's what I did, and it all worked out very well. And it is something that I will always make those type of decisions all the time for my patients, for my practice, for my community. And so when bad things happen, like we get robbed or there's a fire or there's flooding, you take that in stride, you do your best, you have the resources, you fix it, you move on, but don't ever be the type of person who wouldn't help a kid or whatever similar situation you have. Don't be that person who wouldn't do that. And I feel like a lot of us would have done the same thing, which makes me very proud as a profession that that's who we are.
Well, that is a beautiful story and a very selfless and generous way for you to serve somebody, even when you were in a very vulnerable position, to help those in need. I love to hear that. And I want to ask you to continue to do those kind of things and set big, lofty, crazy goals. Because if you keep checking off your goals this easily, I can't wait to see what's next. I really, truly can't. So for those who want to connect with you further, what's the best way for them to do so?
You probably bump into me at one of the conferences, for sure. I go to quite a bit of them every year all across the country, but online, Facebook, Instagram are probably the two main ones that I'm most active on nowadays. The Traveling OD is where you'll find me, but often posting on many of those optometry forums as well too. So you'll see me. I try not to take life too seriously, so I'm usually joking around unless it's a more serious conversation, but don't be afraid to message me, add me, anything like that. I love to, help out people. I'm definitely not the type of guy who will only help if you pay me as a consultant. I feel like it's one of those things that we all need to help each other more. And a lot of people who have taught me, once again, it's not about paying it back, it's about paying it forward. So I'm always willing to do that for people.
Amen to that, Will. Rising tide raises all ships. And so that's it for today's podcast. Everybody who's listening, make sure you share out this story, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for my next podcast where we can reflect and grow stronger together.